You know the names: Roosevelt, Forbes, Perkins, Russell, Astor. You know the institutions: Harvard, Yale, Columbia. You see their names carved into the stone of libraries, museums, university halls, and the private banks that control our economy. These are the American royalty, the Boston Brahmins, the founding families and institutions that built this country. That is the official story. That is the comforting, polite lie we are all told. The truth is a grotesque illusion. The foundation of their wealth, the primary capitalization for the entire American experiment, the very seed money that built the railroads, the banks, and the political dynasties, wasn't just from China trade. It was from drug trafficking, industrial scale, vertically integrated, cartel-level opium smuggling that addicted and destroyed an entire nation. But even that, the fact that America's elite are descended from drug lords, isn't the real secret. The smuggling, the addiction, the millions of deaths, that was just phase one. The real conspiracy, the secret they have spent 200 years burying, is what they did with the money. The mechanism, how they used the ungodly profits from poisoning China to create a shadow financial system, a parallel, unregulated, off-ledger network of toxic paper. A system so powerful, so liquid, that in America's darkest financial hour, this criminal cabal stepped out of the shadows and secretly bailed out the U.S. government. You feel that pinch of inflation every time you buy groceries? You feel that cold spike of fear when you see your 401k dive, while bankers who caused the crash get multi-million-dollar bonuses. You feel like the system is rigged, that the too big to fail banks in 2008, the S&L crisis, the Silicon Valley Bank collapse, are all part of a pattern you can't quite see. That is not a feeling. It's a memory. You are feeling the systemic echo of the original sin, the moment America's financial DNA was permanently and knowingly corrupted by drug money. The moment parasitic finance became the host. We are going to pull on that thread. We are going to show you the receipts. But first, in the comments, let me know, where are you watching this from? What city, what state, what country? It's important to see how far this illusion has spread, how many of us are living in the system they built. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. We don't do the official story here. We do the unfiltered truth. And trust me, after this, you will never look at a US dollar or a Yale diploma the same way again. You've been taught the polite version of history, the story of the Great China Trade. In the early 1800s, America and Britain had a massive trade problem. They were buying millions of pounds of tea, silk, and porcelain from China. The West was addicted to Chinese luxury goods. But China, then a self-sufficient and powerful empire, didn't want anything the West produced. Not our wool, not our trinkets. Nothing. So, Western merchants were forced to pay in the one thing China valued: silver. This created a catastrophic trade deficit. A one-way drain of hard currency that was bankrupting Western economies, emptying the vaults of London and New York. This was a national security crisis. Britain, in its infinite colonial wisdom, found a solution. A dark, toxic, and utterly brilliant solution. Opium, grown in their colony, India, and smuggled into China by the ton. It was illegal, it was poison, and it was insanely profitable. The Chinese government knew it. They banned it. They executed smugglers. But the greed was too strong. Profit margins hit 400%. A single successful voyage could make a man a king. And this is where the American royalty steps in. The official story, the one you read in the plaques at Harvard, says American merchants were reluctant participants. That they were just traders who used their faster clipper ships to get the tea home. This is a carefully crafted, deliberate lie. They weren't just participants. They were pioneers. They were the cartels. They were the traffickers. Warren Delano, too, the grandfather of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, was not some bit player. He was a senior partner at Russell and Company, the largest American opium smuggling firm in China. John Murray Forbes, the Boston patriarch, the man whose name is on streets and towns, ran the entire operation. John Jacob Astor, the fur trader who became America's first multimillionaire, he was one of the first to run Turkish opium into China on his ships. The Perkins, the Russells, the Peabody's, the Lows, the Cabots, they weren't just traders. They were drug lords. They poisoned a nation for profit. By 1838, historians estimate over 12 million Chinese were addicted to opium. The addiction crisis hollowed out the Chinese economy, destroyed its social fabric, and led directly to this century of humiliation, a period of colonial domination and national collapse. And the American families? They took the silver. They returned to Boston and New York. They built 60-room cottages in Newport. They became the Brahmins, the cultural and financial elite. They funded Harvard, Yale, and Columbia. They built hospitals, railroads, and banks. They laundered the money. That's the story you might have heard if you were digging. But it's not the whole story. The real story isn't about laundering. Laundering implies hiding, implies shame. They weren't hiding. They were celebrated. They were openly called China merchants. The source of their wealth was an open secret. No, the real story isn't about laundering. It's about capture. Think about it. What was the other side of this equation? The fledgling United States in the 1830s was a financial basket case. It was drowning in debt from the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812. It had no stable central bank. President Andrew Jackson had just famously and chaotically killed the second bank of the United States. The country was in a populist, anti-bank fervor, leaving a massive vacuum of power. The currency was unstable. The banks were a chaotic, unregulated mess. The entire government was constantly one bad harvest or one dock fire away from total, systemic, catastrophic default. A fragile, unstable system, paralyzed by political infighting and desperately, pathetically short on capital. Sound familiar? Now, picture our opium smugglers. The China merchants. They have a different problem. A good problem. They are making so much money, they can't possibly bring it all home. The silver is heavy. It's slow. It's risky to ship across the ocean. And it's attracting attention. They are drowning in hard assets, in a liquid profit. They have a liquidity problem. So, on one side of the ocean, a desperate, failing government with no money, no central bank, and no credibility. On the other side, a criminal cartel with too much money, too much silver, and zero legitimacy. What happens when these two forces meet? The history books will tell you these men invested their China profits in America's future out of civic duty. They built the railroads. They stabilized the markets. It wasn't civic duty. It was a takeover. They didn't just launder the blood money. They weaponized it. They used their massive, illicit profits to create a new, parallel, shadow financial system. A system of paper that would allow them to control the legitimate economy from the shadows. A system that, in a few short years, would hold the entire U.S. government hostage. This is the midscript twist. This is the part that has been deliberately erased. The smuggling was just the capital generation. That was the dirty work. The real, world-changing genius was in the accounting. The real genius was when they stopped shipping the heavy, slow, visible silver and started shipping paper. Why is paper better than silver? Silver is an asset. It's real. You can hold it, but it's finite. You can't lend out the same piece of silver to 10 different people at the same time. But paper. Paper is a promise. Paper is an idea. Paper is leverage. You can lend out the promise of that silver 10, 20, 100 times. These opium families invented the 19th century equivalent of a collateralized debt obligation, a mortgage-backed security. They created complex financial instruments based on the profits of their illegal drug runs. They created bills of exchange, letters of credit, and insurance pools that were all, at their core, bets on the successful, criminal outcome of an opium shipment. This paper was toxic. It was completely unregulated. It was backed by nothing but addiction, death, and the military muscle of the British Empire. If China ever won the opium wars, if they ever successfully stopped the trade, all of this paper, this mountain of IOUs, would be instantly worthless. This was the first shadow banking system, and this created an incredible, desperate urgency. They had to find a way to swap this toxic, fragile, criminal paper for something real, something legitimate, something permanent, something backed by taxpayers. This operation, this grand financial heist, needed a central hub. It needed a clearinghouse to manage this flood of dirty money, a bank that was not a bank, run by a man whose family name is now synonymous with American power, wealth, and finance. You won't believe the name. Or maybe you will. Because today, that name is printed on the front of a magazine that tells you who the richest people in the world are. The receipt is wilder than you think. The name on the magazine is Forbes. John Murray Forbes. This man was the architect. He, along with Warren Delano II and the partners at Russell and Company and Perkins and Company, were the central bankers of the entire illicit trade. This is the deep dive. This is the how. This is the mechanism they don't want you to understand, because it's the exact same mechanism they use today. It had 3 phases. Phase 1, the Opium Bill of Exchange. This was their solution to the heavy silver problem. It was financial alchemy. Here's how it worked. An American smuggler, like Russell and Company, lands in China and sells 1,000 chests of opium. He gets paid in tons of raw silver. Now, he could load that silver onto his ship and risk pirates and storms sailing it back to Boston. Or he does something smarter. He finds a British merchant in the same port. That British merchant just bought 1,000 chests of tea, a legal good, and needs to pay for it. He needs silver. So, the American drug lord lends his dirty opium silver to the British tea merchant. In exchange, the British merchant gives the American a bill of exchange, a piece of paper, a promise, drawn on his bank back in London. A clean, legitimate British banknote. Think about what just happened. It's the 19th century version of a crypto scam. You're a scammer with $1 million in worthless opium coin. You find someone who needs to pay a $1 million legitimate electric bill. You give them your $1 million in scam tokens, and they give you a $1 million cashier's check from JP Chase. You've just swapped your toxic, illicit trash for a clean, legitimate, spendable asset. The American smuggler now sails back to Boston, not with tons of bloody silver, but with a clean, crisp bill of exchange from a London bank. He deposits it in his Boston bank, and poof. The money is clean. It's tea money. This was the Canton-London-Boston triangle. It was a collusive system that washed the world's dirtiest money through the world's most respectable institutions. Phase 2, the shadow insurance pool. This is where the greed gets even more profound. You can't go to a real insurance company, like Lloyd's of London, and say, "I'd like to insure my shipment of 1,000 chests of illegal narcotics." Lloyd's wouldn't touch it. It's moral hazard. It's an uninsurable risk. So what did the opium families do? They created their own secret insurance pool. The Peabody's, the Russells, the Forbes, the Perkins, they all insured each other's illegal voyages. This isn't insurance. This is a leveraged bet. It's like 5 mafia bosses all agreeing to insure each other's drug shipments. If one shipment gets busted, the other 4 pay him. But no new money ever enters the system. They are just passing their own dirty cash around in a circle while charging themselves premiums for the service. They are printing money from risk itself. They were making, as we said, a 400% profit on the opium itself. Then, they were making another 50 to 100% by insuring that 400% profit. This is the definition of parasitic finance. They were creating new paper assets out of thin air, all backed by the same original crime. Phase 3, the opium future. They didn't just stop there. They began selling paper that was a promise to deliver opium 6 months from now. This is a futures contract. They were selling the hype of future drug runs. They were leveraging time itself. So, now, by the mid-1830s, this cabal of Boston and New York families is sitting on a mountain of this toxic, interconnected shadow paper. Bills of exchange, insurance policies, and futures contracts, all based on the premise that they can continue to poison China forever. It's the 19th century version of a giant, unregulated hedge fund. But they have a problem. It's all fragile. It's all based on a crime. They need to swap it for something real. And then, right on cue, the legitimate system collapses. The Panic of 1837 hits. It was a devastating financial collapse. Andrew Jackson's war on the bank, combined with a real estate bubble, bursts. It is total contagion. 618 banks, a third of all banks in America, fail. Businesses are wiped out. People are in the streets, banging on the locked doors of banks that hold their life savings. The U.S. government, with no central bank, is broke. It cannot pay its debts. It cannot make payroll. The entire American experiment is failing. Does that sound familiar? The system is frozen. There is no liquidity. Nobody has any money. Well, not nobody. Who, in 1837, was sitting on millions in hard silver from China? Who was sitting on tens of millions in clean bills of exchange from London? Who was completely unaffected by the American bank failures because their bank was a shadow system built on opium? The cartel. John Murray Forbes. Warren Delano, George Peabody. They were the only ones with money. So, they stepped out of the shadows. But not as saviors. As vultures. They went to the desperate U.S. government, and they made a deal. It wasn't a bailout. It was a swap. The Great Swap of 1837. The U.S. government was desperate for cash. It needed to sell U.S. Treasury bonds, but no one was buying. Nobody trusted America's full faith and credit. So, the opium cartel said, "We will buy your bonds. We will fund your debt. We will save this country." And the U.S. government, holding its nose, said yes. And what did the cartel buy those bonds with? With their clean London bills of exchange. With the premiums from their shadow insurance. With the paper profits from their opium empire. They swapped their toxic, illicit, worthless, criminal paper for the safest asset on earth, a U.S. Treasury bond, paying a guaranteed 6% interest, backed by the full faith and credit of the American taxpayer. This is the big reveal. The original sin. The U.S. government knowingly saved itself by absorbing the blood money of the opium cartel. This single act permanently merged the shadow system with the legitimate one. The parasitic finance became the host. The opium families didn't just get rich, they became the lenders of last resort to the United States. They privatized the nation's risk and socialized their own criminal profits. The numbers are staggering. By 1840, it's estimated these China merchants held over $50 million in hard assets. In today's money, that's billions, but its value was infinitely higher. At a time when the entire U.S. federal budget was just $25 million, a small, unelected cabal of drug lords held twice the nation's budget in their private hands. They owned the system. This shadow liquidity, now clean and backed by the U.S. taxpayer, was then funneled into legitimate businesses. John Murray Forbes used this capital to build his railroad empire. Over 9,000 miles of track were laid in the 1850s, a legitimate industry built on this shadow capital. The Russell family used it to found the Skull and Bones secret society at Yale. The Delanos used it to build a political dynasty that would put a man in the White House. The opium bond is the direct ancestor of the 2008 mortgage-backed security. The shadow insurance pool is the direct ancestor of the AIG credit default swap. It's the exact same mechanism. Take a toxic, worthless asset, an illegal opium shipment, or a subprime mortgage, bundle it, call it something new, and when it all goes to zero, swap it for government-backed safety. The illusion is the machine. And the stakes are so much higher now. The system these families created, the shadow banking system they invented, is no longer just in Boston, London, and Canton. It's global. The shadow banking system they invented, this unregulated, off-ledger, dark liquidity pool of derivatives, swaps, and private credit, is now estimated to be worth over $60 trillion. It is an empire of paper, and it is unimaginably fragile. The next panic, the next 1837 or 2008, won't just collapse 618 banks. It will collapse the global economy. And who will be there to rescue it? Who will be there to step out of the shadows, with the only liquidity, to swap their assets for the wreckage of our lives? The descendants of the same machine. The names are no longer Forbes or Delano. The names on the buildings are now BlackRock. They are Vanguard. They are Citadel. The mechanism is just faster. The game is the same. This is the final, philosophical lesson. We live in a system built on denial. We are taught to respect the names on the buildings, Forbes, Roosevelt, Russell, while ignoring the blood in the mortar. We are taught to admire the philanthropy that funded the libraries, the hospitals, and the universities, without ever asking where the first million came from. We are told to trust institutions that were, from their inception, founded as a money laundering operation for a criminal cartel. We live on borrowed time, pretending that the parasitic finance at the heart of our world isn't about to demand its payment. We are complicit in our own denial because the truth is too terrifying or too much work to accept. The opium families got rich, then they got respectable, then they wrote the history books. They made sure you would never learn the mechanism by which they captured the system. But now you know. You know the how. The question is, what do you do with this information? Most people will hear this, feel a chill, and then go back to sleep. The denial is comfortable, but you're not most people. You're still here. Share this. Share this video. Don't just like it. Share it with someone who trusts the official story. Force the conversation. Your skepticism, your willingness to question the official narrative, is the only weapon you have left. It is not just a weapon, it is a duty. And subscribe to this channel. Because if you think this is the only secret, you are not paying attention. Here is the final question. Look at the 2008 bank bailouts. Look at the emergency liquidity swaps happening right now, in secret, from the Federal Reserve.